thing that I did think about was the hypocrisy of having a man be inaugurated to be president on the same day as we commemorate MLK. And that same man saying that he was going to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The irony of it.
The irony of it, because...
The hosts of The View absolutely lost it over Donald Trump being sworn in as the 47th president. It's almost like they thought their dislike for him would somehow stop the inauguration from happening. Predictably, they went into a full-blown meltdown. One of the most dramatic moments came when Sunny Hostin went on a rant about the timing of Trump's inauguration falling on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Let's take a look.
Martin Luther King not only wanted racial equality, he wanted economic equality. And that is something that people tend to miss. And I want to remind people that he said that Black Americans deserved reparations for the injustices they faced. He argued that reparations were a form of justice, in fact, not charity. And he said, quote, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." And so in thinking about that, and Donald Trump saying things that this country would be a meritocracy, you're talking about a man who didn't become the president of the United States because of merit. He hasn't had he had no political experience whatsoever. He had no business experience. He was given everything that he has. He is a legacy hire. He is, if anything, a DEI hire. Didn't earn it.
Does Sunny Hostin really think they would reschedule the inauguration just because she's upset about it? Let's be real. Her complaints seem less about the date and more about pushing her own narrative. What's even more concerning is how she frames her argument. Sunny holds on to this outdated and frankly offensive belief that in 2025, Black people are somehow incapable of success. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for equality and opportunity, and he succeeded in paving the way for generations of progress. If Sunny still believes Black people are bootless, it says more about her own perspective than the actual reality of what many have achieved. And then she has the audacity to claim Trump didn't earn his success. That's just hating for the sake of hating. Whether you like Trump or not, you can't deny his achievements. He took a modest New York real estate portfolio, small by industry standards, and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He became a media star, built a cultural brand, and used that momentum to launch a successful presidential campaign, defeating an establishment heavyweight like Hillary Clinton. Against all odds, he made one of the most remarkable political comebacks in history to reclaim the presidency, dismissing all that is simply refusing to acknowledge reality. But Sunny didn't stop there. She went on to criticize the Black performers at Trump's inauguration, turning her frustration into outright demonization. Let's check out her comments.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about that a lot of people are talking about is that there are these Black performers. You mentioned that there were entertainers at the inauguration. There are these Black performers that were performing for Snoop Dogg, Nelly, a couple of others. And I saw Keith Boykin, a friend of mine, say something that I thought was really important, and I wanted to play that clip.
If you look at Donald Trump, the man who would refuse to rent to Black people in the 1970s, who tried to lead a lynch mob against 5 Black and brown kids in the 1980s for the Central Park case, who refused to allow Black casino workers to have a prominent place in his casinos in Atlantic City in the 1990s, who spent 5.5 years lying about Barack Obama's birth certificate in the 2000s, who came into office and then attacked Black people like Colin Kaepernick, who attacked Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss for simply doing their jobs as Fulton County election workers. You dishonor those people when you go and perform for this man who has done nothing but dishonor Black people.
So, you know, for me, even though I didn't watch any of the balls or anything, I think what Keith said is so important for us to remember, that this is who Donald Trump is.
These are the same shame tactics that failed the Democrats during the election, yet they continue to use them. Worse, these are the same tactics aimed at Black individuals who dare to think for themselves and refuse to conform to the party's narrative. They label anyone who steps out of line as a traitor or Uncle Tom simply for choosing to stand on their own 2 feet. When a Black person declares, "I can achieve greatness on my own without relying on anyone's permission," or says, "This is the greatest country on earth, and I have every opportunity to succeed," they're often demonized. Why? Because the Democratic Party thrives on pushing a victim mentality, a mindset that locks people into a narrative of helplessness and dependency instead of one of empowerment and self-reliance. Why would anyone support a party that tells them you can't succeed because of your skin color? It's a toxic message that holds people back rather than lifting them up. Then, Alyssa steps in and gives the panel a reality check, reminding everyone that the era of Trump derangement is over. Let's watch how she delivers that blow.
I was watching and thinking it's time to retire the phrase normalizing Donald Trump. Donald Trump is normalized, whether you like it or not. 75 million people voted for him. He is now as much a part of American history as George Bush, Barack Obama, and any other two-term president. And I was shocked by the imagery of he left 4 years ago in disgrace. He left, barely anyone showed up when he announced his reelection 2 years ago. And now he came back to D.C. like a conquering king. He had the biggest titans of industry there. He had celebrities. He had fashion designers. He had Democrats and every former president there. And I think that it's a moment to take note of why he won and the reasons that he did, but also Democrats are not a footnote in this. They had 4 years to beat him. They had the chance to make a case against him. 4 years ago, they had the White House, the House, the Senate, and Silicon Valley. Now they have none of those above.
She's absolutely right. The era of Trump hysteria and hypocrisy is officially over. The tired strategy of Trump is bad, scary, and racist just isn't landing anymore. It's clear to everyone now that the Democrats' respect for the rule of law, the Constitution, and institutional norms is practically non-existent. The constant fear-mongering about how Trump will destroy everything no longer holds water. People are simply over it. At this point, the Democrats are starting to resemble that person on the street yelling about the end of the world, loud, dramatic, and not taken seriously. The strategy has failed, and it's time to let it go. Now, let's shift gears to their reaction to Trump's pardons, particularly of the January 6th individuals. Alyssa delivers some sharp criticism, pointing out how disgraceful it was for Biden to use his final moments in office to issue controversial pardons for his immediate family. Let's dive into how this unfolded.
I think it was prudent that Joe Biden preemptively pardoned people like Dr. Fauci and Mark Milley, who are political targets for Donald Trump. He has expressed that. I was floored that Joe Biden pardoned his whole family, and let me tell you why. He's either the most charitable interpretation is the Titanic is sinking, I've got a life raft for my family, but anyone else who challenged Trump, you better swim or you're drowning. That's my most charitable interpretation. And finally, he didn't do anything to protect people who testified against Donald Trump unless they happen to be wrapped up with the police officers. And it sets a very dangerous precedent. Now Donald Trump can basically advise staff and his family to do anything unlawful and then just issue a blanket pardon when he leaves office. I think it was disgraceful, and it's going to harm his legacy.
I think comparing Biden's pardons to Trump's is like comparing apples to Volkswagens.
Seems really similar when Jared
It does not seem similar to me because Joe Biden's family and the people he pardoned in the January 6th committee have not actually committed crimes. He is trying to prevent them from spending the rest of their lives fighting the government, which is no easy feat.
Ana Navarro claiming that Biden's pardons were better because everyone was innocent completely misses the point, and most people feel the exact opposite. The outrage stems from the fact that these individuals hadn't been convicted of anything. Issuing blanket pardons for people who weren't even on the radar screams shady behavior. It shows a complete disregard for public perception and raises questions about what Biden might be covering up. Pardons are typically meant for individuals who have been found guilty and deserve clemency, not as a preemptive shield for friends and family. Trump's use of pardons for people who were guilty actually aligns with the traditional purpose of pardoning. It's not out of the norm. It's what pardons are for. Meanwhile, this bizarre defense from Navarro and the others just highlights how out of touch they've become. They're spinning narratives that no one is buying anymore.